we've seen some desirable attributes of the inline block value to the CSS display property, in that we can get elements to sit side by side, that is inline, but we can also give them margin and padding values as we'd expect. So I thought that I would demonstrate a technique that uses the inline block property value to create a grid layout, because we're moving towards creating more complex layouts for our web designs. So it's a grid. We'll need to get some boxes in place. Let's jump in and do that with some HTML structure. To start with, I'm going to create one kind of containing div element, and I'm going to do that with a class. I think I'll just call that big box. So I'm just making that up, could be any name. I'll go down here a bit and close off that div, remembering to make sure that we close off our divs. See if I put my cursor in the opening tag of an element, shows me that underline. Just got to always make sure that we close off our tags. All right, now I'm going to put a series of boxes in here that are going to make up my grid. 6 boxes across and 6 boxes down. We'll do those as divs as well. Great thing about using classes is we can reuse classes. So I'm going to call this class small box. And I'll use that class for all of our grid items. Inside there, I'm going to put some content. Something like that. And I'll make sure that I close off that div. Arrange it more like that. Looks better. Okay, so I've got a box there. One box, we can't kind of see much there. We can just see that content there. I want to make 9 versions of that. I might actually put in a heading at the top. Okay, that's better. All right, now I want 9 versions of this this box. 1, 2. All right, that looks good. 9 versions. Okay, so I reckon our content is in place now. Let's start styling. Our boxes. First thing I'm going to do is add just a little bit of a reset, just out of habit, and I'll reset the margins and padding to 0. Of all elements on the page, and I'll also bring in a font. That in there, and in the body tag I will add the font family. Okay, looking good. Let's get into our boxes, as I said. So we're reusing this small box class. We're going to use that over and over. Well, we're going to write one class and it's going to style all of these divs here. To start with, let's just give it a background color. Whatever you like. I'm just going to use red because it's quick. Okay, so I'll just deselect that. So what we can see here is that we've got a bunch of block HTML elements. That is, we've got a bunch of HTML elements whose display property is the value of block, which is their default property, default display property. So headings, divs, paragraphs, all default block line elements. What we're going to do is change some of them into inline-block elements so that we can have them next to each other, but also we can utilize their margin and padding properties. So I reckon that's what we'll do, although we will, well, let's change the display property to inline block. Just see what happens there. So instantly we can see that our divs here, our small block divs, have collapsed to the size of the content, and they're next to each other. And where they're not next to each other, they wrap around underneath. So they kind of act like they're in a sentence. And we can see as I drag my viewport backwards and forwards there that there are some future possibilities here for responsive design, and that is a layout that will respond differently to different viewport sizes. So you could imagine right out here is maybe a desktop view or your laptop view. Something like this could be a tablet, and then further down here, more of a phone or smartphone kind of layout. Yeah, all right. So let's add to that display property. I might just rearrange these declarations. I like to have the display inline block at the top, although, as you know, it doesn't matter that much. Okay, so adding to the background color, I'm going to turn these into blocks. So I'm going to give them a width of, I think, about 150 pixels. Maybe even a little bit more than 150 pixels. Just trying to think about how this will space out eventually. 150 pixels wide by height of 150 pixels as well. 156 pixels. Great, you can see that grid starting to occur there. Let's space out our boxes by adding some margin. This is the great thing about the inline block display value, is that when we add margin to the top and bottom, it acts like we'd expect. Whereas if it was an inline element, our margin wouldn't show up. It would be kind of frustrating. I think that inside that block, I'm going to add some white for the color of that text. Good. And before I go on, I might add a bit of style to the wrapper, which is called Big Box. So I'm going to get Big Box floating in the center of the the canvas, or the viewport, but I'll start by giving it a max width, 600 pixels. Oops, 600 would be probably better. Excellent. So that's kind of contained our grid to 3 across, and you can see when I drag my viewport a bit narrower, it drops down to 2 columns of thumbnails and then 1 column of thumbnails. So kind of just emphasizing that responsive nature of this layout. What else do I want to do there? Float it into the center. So we'll give it a margin 0 and auto. Super good. So it's now sitting right in the center. I'm also going to give it, you can see it's the boxes sitting in there are not quite centralized. So I'm going to add some text align of center to center all of my grid and all of my text there. I think that's about it for my box, and also pretty much for my small boxes as well. Apart from, last thing I might do is add some padding just around the content inside the box, so maybe 10 pixels of padding, and that brings those thumbnails out a bit closer to the edge of the container as well. All right. So we've finished up there. We've created a kind of a grid layout, something that's very often used on the internet and web design. A series of thumbnails, I suppose, and we've created that layout by implementing the display property and giving it a value of inline-block to a series of small divs that we've created. And the great thing about inline-block is it kind of takes the good aspects of display block and display inline, kind of uses them together, and we can actually incorporate that technique to create some layout. And in this instance, it does have some responsive attributes in that it will collapse down to 2 columns and then a single column when I bring my viewport to a narrower kind of width.